this is a great turnout.
Yes.
So, all right, so let's get right into it. This is the 30th anniversary of GoldenEye this year. I prepared some notes, did a little research before the panel, and then at some point we're going to show the trailer for the film when we get to it in terms of where I'm going with this. And my friend Rob here. And this is Rob.
Hello.
I'm Bill, and nice to see you all. So, okay. So in 1989, License to Kill was released, and while profitable, it was not considered a giant success. Many reasons were given at the time. It came out in the summer that was swamped with competition. Batman, Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, and even Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of buried it at the box office. Another problem was that MGM's marketing team, while they were working on promoting the film, were fired halfway through the promotion, and left it to the point where basically the only real advertising for the film,
Close the door.
about a week's worth of television commercials before the movie came out, and a couple of trailers, and that was it. So, and also the very dark tone of the film didn't really help either. It was a different type of Bond film. I mean, Dalton was excellent, but many reasons. Again, it was a profitable movie, but it was not the success of like prior Bond films have been. But Timothy Dalton remained the Bond of record. Cubby did not want to give him up, and it was decided, however, that fresh blood was needed to develop the film, the new movie, and longtime screenwriters Richard Maybaum was basically let go. We were going to have to do the next one, and John Glenn, who directed 5 Bond films, decided he was going to go as well.
Would that be the astronaut one, John Glenn?
No, John Glenn, the British director, who's still around. He's the only original of the first 20 film, first 16 films, the only director that's still with us. All right, so then Eon had discussed with different screenwriters about where to go with the new movie. They contacted Gloria and William Hook, who wrote both Howard the Duck and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, to develop a script.
That's
Howard the Duck, what a quack.
And it didn't go very far, but they worked on one. Another screenwriter contacted was Lawrence Ruggiero, who wrote episodes of Miami Vice and Airwolf. And he wrote a treatment that took place in Hong Kong and China, and featuring, amongst other things, a female robot. I guess sort of like the fembots from Austin Powers. It was an odd script. And if you guys are familiar with Mark Edlitz's book, The Lost Adventures of James Bond, but he goes throughout the entire script in there. I highly recommend the book. Track it down. Mark's a great guy, and he goes through the entire process of developing, the unmade Dalton film, and this is one of the scripts for it. And the villain in the piece was a British, wealthy British industrialist, and he was working with the Chinese. And the idea was he was going to create a nuclear device, basically explode in China, and then there'll be regime change. They kind of used some of those ideas for Tomorrow Never Dies, but they didn't use it for Goldeneye. However, there was a stealth fighter in it, and there was also a tank chase in the script. Okay, now as the script was being developed, MGM UA, which owned half the Bond film. I don't know if you guys are familiar with how the rights. I went through this yesterday, but back in the early '60s, when Cubby Brock and Harry Sullivan formed a partnership, they basically bought the rights to Fleming's novels outright, and the development of the films and all the first refusal options and continuation. Now, United Artists was the distributor. They didn't own the series, but they distributed the films. So in the mid '70s, Harry Saltzman decided that he wanted to get out. He had made some bad investments and other things, and instead of selling his partnership to Cubby, which he should have done, he actually sold it to United Artists. United Artists then became half owners of the Bond series, but Cubby was still retained creative control. He decided with the cast as Bond, that sort of thing, but United Artists financed it. And United Artists had undergone several changes with their corporation. They merged one company to another, and then in 1990 or so, Pat AT&T Communications acquired it, and they sold the foreign television rights to the Bond films for a lower value than Cubby deemed they were worth. So he filed a lawsuit, and that suit dragged on for several years, and that delayed full production of the next film. So the lawsuit was actually settled in December of '93. So as the suit was ongoing, Cubby was so distraught he actually toyed with the idea of selling the series, and he was asking price at that time was $166 million. Now, no one bought it, obviously. But what happened this past year, there was precedent for it. I mean, they had thought about selling the series before. But to keep the image of Bond in the public eye, they developed the James Bond Jr. television series. And you guys are familiar with that, but I remember I watched it my first year of law school, and every afternoon it was on. It was a bizarre show. I mean, they couldn't have any.
It was on Channel 9, wasn't it?
Maybe Channel 9 here. It was
Yeah,
on whatever
yeah.
local station in D.C. when I was in school.
WOR.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they had the premise was that it was about James Bond's nephew, somehow called James Bond Jr. And despite the fact that Bond didn't have any siblings in the backstory, but they created one. But Bond himself never shows up in it. He's teamed up with Felix Leiter's son, named Gordo, Q's grandson, Horace Boothroyd, nicknamed IQ. There was a girl whose name was Tracy. She was the daughter of the headmaster of the school where Bond was going to school, and he would go up against scum, saboteurs and criminals united in mayhem.
That stinks.
So, and somehow in that, Dr. No was still around, and now he's green for some reason.
The Hulk.
Jaws is back, and Jaws talks, and his teeth, it still looks similar, but they changed the bottom of the jaw. Knick-Knack, from the man with the golden gun, also shows up in it.
Buster Plane.
Goldfinger and Oddjob, who for some reason have Spanish accents. Okay.
We gotta mention John.
Oh yes, and John Peel.
John Peel, who's here, worked on that.
He actually novelized several of the scripts for Eon, and he had a tough time working with them. And he's very knowledgeable about Bond. He wanted to put things into the books that they said you couldn't do that, you couldn't do that, you couldn't do that. But
He said it was more of a headache
Yeah.
than anything, so that's what he basically says. The short version.
But there was a lot of merchandising for the film, and Marvel did a 12-issue comic series of adaptations. So it was a push behind it, and
To keep the name out
keep
alive.
the name out. Yeah, but basically since then they've been kind of embarrassed about it. There's been no official release on DVD or Blu-ray or streaming. I mean, as of last year when I checked, every episode is available on YouTube.
Yeah, I just checked.
You do check? There you go. Thanks.
65.
The home video recordings basically they post on YouTube. And hopefully now with the Amazon deal, we might see an official release of it. I mean, that'd be kind of cool. Corey Burton, who I was just telling Rob earlier, who's a voice artist, voiced Bond Jr., and he recently did Kane. I'm sorry, was the character from Clone Wars? The bounty hunter.
Oh yeah, Cad Bane.
Cad Bane, yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and that's James Bond Jr. So all right. So anyway, during the time, even though the film wasn't officially greenlit yet, they figured they would need a director, and they spoke to Martin Campbell, who had directed the movie No Escape, which was a great action film. I thought he might be good for Bond, and he wasn't that expensive. He had also worked on Riley Ace of Spies and the BBC series Edge of Darkness, which Eon was very impressed with both of them. So he was contacted, they hired him, and then once the lawsuit was settled, they set the budget for the film at $50 million, which was, it may seem, it was a lot at the time, but in terms of other films it was less than some, it was somewhere in the middle.
Probably less than Moonraker.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think Moonraker's for some reason 36 million in my mind, but
Because it's heavily special effect.
yeah. So
The Star Wars after.
and John Calley was named to be the head of United Artists, and he was a big Bond fan. Okay, he worked with an executive named Jeff Kleeman, who did several interviews. You can find him online. He's very interesting what he has to say. And they had done market research because at this point it had been several years since the Bond film had come out. They want to know if they can market the movie to a new audience. And the key moviegoer basically I think is like 12-year-old boys. That's the idea. That's what they want to see these films. And when they were asking the questions, they either didn't know who Bond was or something that their father liked. So neither of them were going to necessarily work to make the film a success. Anyway, they were still developing scripts. John Cork of the Ian Fleming Foundation was brought in, pitched a series of ideas, and he came up with like a Bond Bible of where Bond would be in the '90s in terms of a character. None of his ideas actually used, but they kept the Bible in mind. Also, screenwriter Michael France, who was also a Bond fan, he actually wrote this newsletter called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He's a fan. And he'd written Cliffhanger, the Sylvester Stallone film. So they worked with him, and he basically developed the script, which was the basis for GoldenEye. He created the character Trevelyan, who in the initial story was an older mentor of Bond's, as opposed to being a fellow 00 agent, and also the Russian locations. And another screenwriter named Jeffrey Kane was brought in to do more work on the script, and he decided to make Trevelyan a contemporary of Bond's and another 00 agent. And he came up with the pre-title sequence where Bond and him are on a mission together. So get an idea of the camaraderie between the two characters. And then they figured the script needed punching up. So they brought in Bruce Fierstein, who wrote the book called Real Men Don't Eat Quiche. He was like a comedy writer and he wrote for the New Yorker. He wrote a few screenplays. But he was very close friends with Fred Zola, who was Barbara Broccoli's husband. And he was brought in, and he worked on the script some more, and he came up with the concept of making M a woman, having the original M retire, based on the fact that the MI6 MI5 at the time, the British Security Service, was headed by one of these Stella Remington. And there's a lot of stories that the head of MI6 the head of MI6 was still a man, but they kept the same idea. In real life, they kept the same idea. I think currently, actually, the head of MI6 is a woman. And Fierstein stayed connected with the series. He wrote the screenplays for the next two films. He wrote 6 of the video games. And he is now currently working on the 007 Road to a Million series. He wrote the screen with the scenes with Brian Cox's character. Yeah. So, and it's funny, when he flew to London, he got there and he was given a tough time at customs when he arrived there. He said, "What are you doing? What's your purpose in Britain?" He said, "Well, kind of secret, I'm here to work on the next James Bond film." So, well, that's all they had to hear. So, and they stamped this passport. Says, "You take care of our James." So,
Next.
and an essential element of Fierstein's script was the concept, although the world had changed with the collapse of the Soviet Empire, Bond himself remained the same. He remained the same character, and and things around him may be different, but he would still be the Bond that we all knew. And okay, so then the point is they're going to decide who's going to play James Bond. Cubby and Barbara Broccoli and Michael Buster still wanted Dalton, but Kleeman and John Calley were saying, well, they were changing things around. They want a younger actor, a different actor to play James Bond. And there's victim versions of what actually happened after that. Now, the point is that Pierce Brosnan, as was probably all know, is that he was actually signed to play Bond back several years before, after View to a Kill came out, before Living Daylights, and he was involved in TV series called Remington Steele. Okay, but Remington Steele had been canceled, and there was 60 days to renew the show, even though it was canceled. And Brosnan was signed to play James Bond. So the MTM Studios, let's go ahead and we'll renew the series. Got James Bond in the show. And then Cubby Broccoli said no. He's not going to play a similar character James Bond television that would be in the movies. And I guess it wasn't a completely signed contract. Brosnan did not get to play James Bond at that point. So, but he was always in the public eye. There was always people, picturing to play Bond. But even though that was the case, they weren't necessarily sure they wanted him because Remington Steele had been on several years before. He wasn't as big an actor as he was then, in his interest of popularity. And they screen tested other actors to play the role. Sean Bean was one of them that they spoke to. And they also thought about Mel Gibson. But Mel Gibson wanted, his asking price was $20 million. So I said, well, they couldn't afford him. But they also spoke to Liam Neeson, they spoke to Ray Fiennes, and they were being considered. But ultimately, I think Brosnan is still in the.
Well, Brosnan was kind of, Cubby thought about him back in the day when his
Right.
wife was in,
Right.
you know, I
Yeah.
don't know if you're aware, his first wife was a Bond girl.
Cassandra Harris was
Yes.
in Theorized Only with him. And when they were doing the movie,
He was on set.
he was on set. And even back in '81, he was driving home, rehearsing the line, "My name is Bond, James Bond." So he wanted to play the role. So the thing is, that there's, so, okay. So Dalton was still a favorite though of Cubby and of Barbara Broccoli. And they were at an impasse. And they couldn't make the film without Cubby, and Cubby couldn't make the film without them. Now there was a story that Cubby had surgery around that time, and when he was under the knife, Michael Wilson was approached by John Calley and said, "Listen, we gotta do this film. We gotta let Dalton go." And and Michael Wilson said, "Okay," but now that's been refuted. That story. So I don't know if it's true or not. But I do know that on April 12th, 1994, okay, I called Dan Jacket because there was no stories about it. So what the hell? I'll give him a call, see what's going on. So and they answered the phone. The receptionist said, "Hi," I said, "Hi. What's going on next James Bond film?" She says, "Well, who's calling?" I said, "I'm Bill Canis." She says, "Who?" And I said, "I'm a big James Bond fan." "Oh, okay." So she said, "Let me get Mr. Broccoli's spokesman." So Cubby's spokesman got on the phone with me, and I said, "Hi, how you doing?" He said, "What's going on next James Bond film?" He goes, "Well, at this point, he says, well, if all goes well, we start shooting in September." Well, that's the first concrete news I had about the film in years. "Well, that's great." And he says, "Do you have a title yet?" He goes, "Well, no title, no star." So I said, "Really? Isn't Timothy Dalton returned?" He says, "Well, at this point, it's doubtful." I said, "Well, why is it? I really can't talk about that." So, okay, so now literally the next day, Timothy Dalton put a press release out saying he wasn't coming back to play James Bond. Now, did my call precipitate this? I don't know. And in the press release, what do you actually see? He
Did
said,
they record your phone call?
I don't know. And it was an interesting word of press release. Dalton said, "Even though the Broccoli's have always made it clear to me that they want me to resume my role in the next James Bond feature, I have now made this difficult decision. The Broccoli's have been good to me as producers. They have been even more special as friends." So Dalton remained close to Cubby and the family, and
Was there any animosity with Dalton?
Not in the Broccoli's.
Like
No.
you like felt like you got cheated out,
I-
pushed out.
He may thought he was pushed out, but he never blamed Cubby Broccoli, Barbara Broccoli, never anything. At Cubby's funeral, he was one of the pallbearers.
Oh wow.
And that was a year and a half later. And at the memorial service, I would publish 007 magazine, and they did the entire transcript of all the testimonies given. I mean, Roger did a great job. Pierce's was shorter, but Dalton was very, very heartfelt. I mean,
Yeah.
so there was no animosity between Dalton and the Broccoli's. Maybe with United Artists, but it was a new regime there. Plus, one thing, Dalton never really embraced the role that other actors who played Bond was. I mean, he was appreciative of doing it, but he didn't become James Bond in the sense that Roger Moore had, and then even the way that Pierce Brosnan had. And so I think he was.
Wasn't Dalton only open to returning for one film, like as a
I-
capper, and they definitely wanted him for like 3?
Yeah, I think that may be part of it.
Yes,
too.
that might have been
And that was
the sticking
another
point.
impasse.
Yeah.
That he just wanted to come back
The
one,
one
say
movie.
goodbye to the
That's true.
role.
That is
And
true.
they're like, well, we can't bring you back and just do this all over
One
again.
movie. Yeah. So then, but there's also another story too, that when they were coming to make a decision, it was between Dalton and Brosnan. And John Calley and Kleeman had pushed for Brosnan, and Cubby, Barbara and Michael pushed for Dalton to return, and Cubby listened to both sides, and he tapped his cane, and he said, "We're going with Pierce." And so when that all happened to the timeline.
You're not talking about Hawkeye, Pierce.
No, Pierce Brosnan. So, okay, but the point is, on June 1st, 94, Pierce Brosnan got the phone call from his agent confirming that he was going to be the next James Bond. And the next week, June 8th, I remember that day specifically, every single evening news broadcast.
Entertainment Tonight.
Right.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, Entertainment Time, which is true. But the evening news,
Yeah.
and every single one, they talked about Brosnan coming to play James Bond. So, and he shows up at the press conference, he's got a beard, they're doing the Robinson Crusoe film, and said, looked like James Bond at the time, his hair was a little longer.
Which is a very good film, by
Yeah.
the way.
Robinson Crusoe, I never actually saw
Yes.
that. Yeah?
I think it's on Prime. I saw it within the last year. It's very good.
But the film was greenlit, and Brosnan was going to do it, and then they started casting the rest of the movie. They were looking for a Russian girl, to play Natalia Simonova, and they wanted finding a Polish actress who was similar. She actually knew Russian too. The longest church in Russian Yugoslavia. Isabel Skorupko to play the girl. Please.
When Brosnan signed on for GoldenEye, what was his picture contract at the time?
I don't know what he got in terms of initial salary, but usually a 3-picture
It was
deal.
a 3-picture deal.
And then, and then they added one more at the end.
Depending how, and the standard contract for Bond actors, they sign for a 3-picture deal. Depending, the first film flops, they're not going to do another 2, but there's the option for the other 2, and then subsequent ones are negotiated per picture. That's always Roger Moore. And just real quick, with regard to Brosnan, when Dying of the Day at the press conference, when the movie opening and filming, they announced at that press
There's another
conference
one, yeah.
he was going to do a 5th film. And then obviously he did. Things happened between then, to that point and that point. So obviously it wasn't a signed contract, it was just a verbal agreement. So
Well, that's when they won the rights
Yeah.
to Casino Royale, and that kind of
Right.
changed everything.
it did.
I mean,
No, it certainly did.
yeah.
But and also too, one other thing is that this John Gavin was an American actor who had been signed to play Bond for Live and Let Die. Okay, and no, was it Live and Let Die? No, I'm forgetting. One of them. Live and Let Die, but he actually never. No, I think it was Diamonds Are Forever. They went with Connery instead, but they still paid John Gavin for it. So okay. So anyway,
So on her, the actress, at the time, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure she used to be married to an ex-Islander
Yeah.
on the island, if I remember, one of the Islander
Yeah.
players.
A few years later, she did.
Yes.
She married a hockey player.
Yes.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, in the script for Tomorrow Never Dies, there's Jack Wade asks, whatever became of Natalia, and Bond says, well, she married a hockey player. But that was cut from the script. But okay, and then for the femme fatale, Xenia Onatopp, they cast Famke Janssen, a Dutch actress who lived in the United States. She went to Columbia in the early '90s, and she had been the perfect mate in Next Generation. She'd just done a film called Blood of Illusions, which they very much liked. They thought she'd be good for the role. And she actually, before that, turned down the role of Zia Dax in Deep Space Nine. She wanted to come down and film with her. So they also had the British actor Robbie Coltrane, who was a favorite of Eon. They cast him without even having the character film. They developed the character in the script. Joe Don Baker was brought in.